Tonight, we step gently into a part of American history that rarely speaks loudly. A story not told through headlines or dramatic moments, but through quiet control, routine decisions, and invisible influence. This is the story of how the American Mafia did not only operate in dark alleys or smoky back rooms, but also in meeting halls, union offices, and negotiation tables. A story about work, about loyalty, and about power that learned to hide in plain sight. So allow your breathing to slow, let the outside world fade, and drift with me into the quiet machinery of 20th century America. In the early decades of the 1900s, the United States was changing rapidly. Factories rose along rivers, railroads stretched across the land, cities filled with workers seeking stability, wages, and dignity. Millions of immigrants arrived with hope and little protection. They worked long hours, they faced dangerous conditions, and they needed representation. From this need, labor unions grew. Unions promised safety, fair pay, predictable schedules. They became voices for workers who otherwise had none. But wherever money, organization, and influence gathered, others noticed. The Mafia, still forming its American identity, understood something essential. Power did not always come from violence. Often, it came from control. Control over transportation, control over labor, control over timing. If you could stop work, you could stop money. And if you could allow work to continue, you could demand a price. The Mafia did not rush into unions. They waited. They observed how unions worked, who led them, who controlled the membership lists, who signed the contracts. They learned the system quietly. In cities like New York, Chicago, Detroit, and Philadelphia, unions became deeply tied to industries the Mafia already understood: docks, trucking, construction, waste removal, and manufacturing. These were industries where delays mattered, where strikes could cripple cities, where silence could be purchased. The Mafia approached unions not as enemies, but as opportunities. They began by offering help, protection from rival groups, assistance during strikes, support in negotiations. Union leaders, often overwhelmed and underfunded, sometimes welcomed the stability. And slowly, influence grew. Control did not always mean ownership. Sometimes it meant influence over elections. Other times, influence over hiring. Union halls became places where decisions were shaped before votes were cast. Jobs could be granted or quietly denied. Contractors learned that peace came at a price. Pay the right people, and work would continue smoothly. Refuse, and delays would mysteriously appear. Truck routes would slow. Materials would arrive late. Workers would suddenly become unavailable. No threats were needed. The system spoke for itself. One of the most powerful tools the Mafia used was predictability. They did not seek chaos. Chaos drew attention. They preferred order, routine, a calm surface. Behind that surface, money flowed. Kickbacks became part of doing business, a percentage here, a fee there. Small amounts multiplied across industries. The Mafia did not need to control every union, only the most strategic ones. Dock workers controlled ports. Teamsters controlled transportation. Construction unions controlled cities' skylines. If concrete did not pour, buildings did not rise. The Teamsters Union became especially powerful. With hundreds of thousands of members and control over nationwide trucking routes, the union became a critical artery of American commerce. And where arteries exist, control matters. Through influence, intimidation, and careful alliances, Mafia figures gained leverage within union leadership. Not always publicly, not always directly,
sometimes through friends, sometimes through favors, sometimes through silence. Union funds grew large. Pension funds especially held enormous amounts of money. These funds were meant for workers' futures, but quietly they became sources of loans, investments, and leverage.
Money from pension funds found its way into casinos, hotels, and construction projects. Las Vegas rose partly on this quiet flow of union money. Workers did not always know, and many did not ask. They were paid. They had jobs. The system appeared to work. For decades, this arrangement remained mostly invisible. Politicians often looked away. Businesses accepted it as reality. Workers focused on their daily lives. The mafia thrived not because it was loud, but because it blended in. But silence cannot last forever. By the mid-20th century, federal authorities began to listen more closely. The FBI, once hesitant to pursue organized crime aggressively, slowly changed strategy. They stopped looking for dramatic crimes and began studying patterns. Who controlled contracts? Who benefited from delays? Who always seemed untouched? Wiretaps replaced raids. Patience replaced force. Investigations took years. The mafia underestimated this quiet approach. They were used to fear, not listening. Slowly, conversations were recorded, connections were mapped, money trails emerged. Union corruption trials followed. Some leaders fell. Others cooperated. The system weakened not through collapse, but through exposure. New laws increased oversight. Union elections became more transparent. Pension funds faced stricter rules. The mafia did not disappear overnight, but its grip loosened. Industries modernized. Globalization changed labor structures. Technology replaced certain roles. What once required control over people now required control over systems, and systems were harder to intimidate. By the late 20th century, the era of mafia-dominated unions was fading. Not with violence, not with a single moment, but with time. Today, the story remains a lesson in how power can exist quietly, how systems can be shaped without headlines, and how influence often travels through ordinary places. Union halls, office desks, meeting rooms. The mafia understood America not as a battlefield, but as a network. And networks, when left unchecked, can be guided gently, until someone finally looks closely. Now, as this story settles into the past, the noise fades. The factories quiet. The docks rest. The trucks roll on without notice. And you are left with stillness. A reminder that history does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers, until it no longer needs to. Rest now. Let the story drift away and sleep.